As we come on air tonight, is this the end for the Prime Minister? Boris Johnson's time in Downing Street is hanging by a thread. Dozens of government ministers say they can no longer remain loyal to the PM.
When times are tough and when the country faces pressures on the economy, that is exactly the moment that you'd expect a government to continue with its work, not to walk away.
Even his closest allies like Michael Gove say he has to go. Amidst a day of seemingly insurmountable criticism and crumbling support, we're live in Westminster.
A day of drama, a premiership crumbling, more than 30 resignations.
The only key question tonight is the Johnson premiership to be measured in hours, days or weeks.
As the political battles continue in Parliament, we'll hear from Scottish voters who say enough is enough.
Well, he's not been honest. You have to be straightforward with the public.
If he had any sense at all, just go now.
I'm Kellyanne Woodland. This is the STV News at 6. Good evening. It's the beginning of the end for Boris Johnson. In the past 24 hours, his premiership has fallen apart. He's faced cabinet resignations as scores of ministers, aides and backbenchers deserted him, and the calls for him to go just keep on mounting. Well, let's go straight to Westminster where it's all happening, and our correspondent, Catherine Sampson.
Yes, this is an extremely fast-moving story today. At times, it has almost been hard to keep up with the resignations. We've been asking not who's gone now, but who is actually left now. In the last few minutes, David Duguid, the North of Scotland Tory MP, one of only two who remains loyal to the Prime Minister in that confidence vote just a month ago, has resigned from his trade envoy role. Now, very shortly, we're going to be bringing you all the latest lines about where we are right now. But first, let's take a look, after those dramatic resignations last night, about how today unfolded for a Prime Minister under pressure.
Is it all over, Prime Minister?
Leaving Downing Street for Prime Minister's questions. If Boris Johnson was wondering if this would be his last, he wasn't showing it, despite this reception inside. After a raft of government resignations, Sir Keir Starmer attacked those ministers who've chosen to remain
only in office because no one else is prepared to debase themselves any longer. The charge of the lightweight brigade. Doesn't the country deserve better than a Z-list cast of nodding doves?
A bitter message from the Tory backbenches too.
Does the Prime Minister think there are any circumstances in which he should resign?
Frankly, Mr. Speaker, the job of a Prime Minister in difficult circumstances when he's been handed a colossal mandate is to keep going, and that's what I'm going to do.
It's a minor miracle that the Prime Minister has even made it through to Prime Minister's questions, and he really ought to see the faces behind him because, Prime Minister, it really is over. So if the Prime Minister won't resign, will he call a general election and allow Scotland the choice of an independent future?
Sajid Javid's resignation as Health Secretary last night may have heralded the beginning of the end. This afternoon, the Prime Minister was forced to publicly listen to his reasons.
And now this week again, we have reason to question the truth and integrity of what we've all been told. And at some point, we have to conclude that enough is enough.
He made a sharp exit, but it was far from over. And there was restlessness amongst those Scottish Conservatives who have called for the Prime Minister to go.
It's become quite clear to me that the government is incapable of functioning right now, and unfortunately responsibility for that lies at the very top, which is why I've requested another vote of confidence.
Meetings and plotting continues behind the scenes, but removing a Prime Minister who doesn't want to go isn't easy. Well, our special correspondent Bernard Ponsonby is with me now. Bernard, how would you describe the atmosphere here tonight? Quite surreal, isn't it?
Absolutely surreal. People have been converging in this green, expecting to see a political execution today, but the hangman didn't turn up. But be in no doubt about the significance of this. This is a prime ministership which is crumbling. This is a government in office which is crumbling before our very eyes. And the problem that the prime minister has is quite simple. He has to put new people in when all of these folk have resigned. If you can't actually get people to do the job, you can't get on with the business of governing.
Can the Prime Minister in any world survive this, and how long might you give him?
Oh, I think probably a day. In Downing Street at the moment, cabinet colleagues in open revolt, about to tell the Prime Minister he has to go. If they can't persuade him to go tonight or tomorrow, the 1922 committee will actually, I think next week, change the rules which will allow another vote of confidence in the Prime Minister. He has absolutely no chance whatsoever of surviving that vote of confidence. So it doesn't matter how you turn, it doesn't matter how you analyse it. From the point of view of crumbling cabinet support, crumbling backbench support, it all adds up to one thing. His premiership is probably going to be over in a matter of hours.
Now, for months we have been talking about what all this means for the Scottish Conservatives and their leader, Douglas Ross. And earlier, Bernard caught up with him here on College Green.
Douglas Ross, should the Prime Minister stay or should the Prime Minister go?
He should go. It's not a decision members take lightly. I came to the conclusion ahead of the 1922 vote about a month ago that I couldn't in good faith continue to support the Prime Minister. And what we've seen in the last 24 hours are loyal cabinet ministers and junior ministers who did support the Prime Minister just a month ago when over 40% of the party couldn't, have now changed their mind and have said, we've just heard from the former Health Secretary that he had given the Prime Minister the benefit of the doubt a number of times but couldn't continue to do that. So from some of the most senior positions in government, people are saying they can no longer support the Prime Minister, and I hope he looks at the situation now and sees that the right thing for him to do is step aside.
Of course, what's brought this to a head is really the judgment of the Prime Minister and colleagues who are questioning the honesty and the integrity of the Prime Minister. Are you comfortable with your own judgments through this process? Because you called him to go some time ago, then in relation to the war in Ukraine, you effectively said now is not the time. You're now calling him to go again. Scottish Conservative voters looking at this will say, well, we look for leadership from Douglas Ross on this key question. He's all over the shop.
I would disagree with, all over the shop, because actually I changed my position due to war in Ukraine. Because of the war in Ukraine, something I don't think even, the most experienced commentators were thinking could have happened at the turn of the year. What I'm comfortable with is when it came to going into the 22 committee, to either say I had confidence or no confidence in the Prime Minister, I took the right choice. And what we're seeing now is very senior members of the government who took a different choice from me a month ago are now saying time to change, time for the Prime Minister to move on.
Can the Scottish Conservatives move forward electorally with Boris Johnson as Prime Minister?
I don't think that is something we're going to see in the coming days or weeks. I think we are now at the very final end of Boris Johnson's premiership, and therefore we've got to look at what happens beyond that. And I think we're already seeing discussions about who may replace the Prime Minister.
OK, an interesting interview there that Bernard did with Douglas Ross. And interesting as well to note that, of course, now we're in a situation with David Duguid resigning from his Trade Envoy role tonight, where Alistair Jack, the Scottish Secretary, is 1 out of 6 Scottish Tory MPs still loyal to the Prime Minister. And of course, I think we're going to see more developments through this evening. This story is definitely far from over.
Absolutely, and Catherine, pundits have thought Boris Johnson was on borrowed time for months, but this time it does look like the party is coming to an end.
Well, yeah, I suppose the Prime Minister would say he still has a mandate, he still has a majority. He's certainly really been trying to push the line today that he's still defiant, that he's still going to plough on and do the job of government. And we saw him just, tonight. He's written to the First Minister amidst all of this, ruling out the granting of that Section 30 order. So you can see the letter now on the screen there. So in terms of Boris Johnson, there's certainly been a sense today if he's trying to give the impression what he is continuing as Prime Minister, even while everything else appears to be crumbling around him. Now, back in Scotland, of course, Boris Johnson's future is being discussed across the country, and our senior reporter, Gordon Cree, has been gauging some reaction to all this in East Renfrewshire.
Leafy Newton Mearns has traditionally been a strong area for the Conservatives, but in the town today, there wasn't much love for Boris Johnson.
When Rishi Sunak and Sajid Javid voted in confidence for him about 4 weeks ago, they must have been screaming inside about doing that because the man is a buffoon.
I feel sorry for him. I don't know. I just feel sorry for him.
Okay.
But there again, you should just say things you shouldn't say.
I think he has a moral duty now to leave because I really think I can't think how he can go on when it looks like half the country is against him.
This area, part of East Renfrewshire, had a Tory MP before the last election. As Johnson swept to a landslide in Parliament, this seat was lost.
Well, I think the figures speak for themselves. We won this constituency with quite a nice majority under Theresa May, and then we promptly lost it again in 2019. So I think the numbers do the talking for themselves.
Come the next general election, this will be a key target seat for the Conservatives. And from the people I've been speaking to today, it's pretty clear their chances of taking it are enhanced rather than diminished by Boris Johnson going. Gordon Cree, STV News, Newton Mearns.
Well, we'll of course go back to Westminster for any developments, be assured of that. But for now, let's take a look at other news across Scotland. Well, the Scottish Government is aiming to eradicate waits of more than 2 years for outpatients at Scottish hospitals by the end of next month. The Health Secretary, Hamza Yousaf, announced what he described as extremely ambitious targets to reduce long waiting times for planned care. Opposition parties have accused ministers of massaging the figures. Our political correspondent Ewan Petrie reports.
Left, right.
David Robertson is getting back on his feet after a knee replacement operation. Last October he was told he may have to wait up to 20 months. But the reopening of an orthopaedic theatre at Perth Royal Infirmary meant he could receive the treatment on Monday.
The phone call I got from the lady down the stairs from here came as a total shock. So I've been one of the fortunate few that have been pumped up the list a bit, shall we say.
You might have to travel a little bit to get it done sooner.
The Health Secretary today announced new targets to reduce delays in planned care. He wants to end 2-year waits for most outpatient appointments by the end of August. And the aim is to eliminate waits of 2 years for most inpatient or day case treatment by the end of September.
What difference do you think these new targets for elective surgery will make in terms of tackling the backlog?
I think they make people focus more on what we need to do, which is to get patients in, get them well prepared and get them through their surgery and the treatment. It means that we have to keep an eye on the target the whole time and have to keep going.
Are they achievable, do you think?
I hope so. And I'm sure they will be, and we'll certainly strive to achieve them.
Despite failing to meet the 4-hour A&E waiting time targets for the past 2 years, the Health Secretary insists these targets are achievable.
I think the public understand the reasons for not meeting the A&E targets. I've not met members of the public who don't understand. They understand because they see the pressure the pandemic has brought to bear. And what is the biggest shock of the NHS's 74-year existence? The reason why we think we can get through these targets is we are working on the basis of the data that's available in front of us, including and factoring in the effects of the pandemic. Now, if we get hit by a wave of a variant that has immune escape so that the vaccine is not effective against it, then clearly Clearly that's going to have an impact on our targets. There's no getting away from that. But we factored in the current pressures we're facing, and that's why we're confident we can meet these ambitious targets.
Opposition parties say the plans lack ambition and accused ministers of moving the goalposts to massage the figures. Ewan Petrie, STV News.
The number of positive COVID-19 cases in Scotland has risen by more than 40% in a single week. Figures from Public Health Scotland show almost 22,000 people contracted the virus in the 7 days up to the 3rd of July. Nearly 1 in 5 confirmed cases are reinfections. Well, our chief reporter Sharon Frew joins us now. And Sharon, the true number of infections may be much higher since routine testing is no longer available.
Well, yes, it's estimated around 1 in 15 people in Scotland now have the virus. Now, that's based on surveillance by the Office for National Statistics, who carry out testing in randomly selected households and on wastewater samples. Now, today's update, as you said, is from Public Health Scotland. Now, it shows more than 1,400 patients in hospital have tested positive for COVID. Now, that's up 25% from last week. Of the 22,000 people, new cases overall, 4,000 people have had the virus before. Now, early on in the pandemic, the reinfection rate was around 1%. Now that rate is around 18%.
It's showing us that previous infection or the vaccine is not working quite as well on symptoms. And I have to stress, it's the symptoms. What it is working well is in relation to serious illness and in deaths, where we're not seeing nearly the numbers that we're seeing even 10 months ago. So the virus is definitely adapting and changing, and the population is adapting and changing.
And A&E departments coming under intense pressure, Sharon.
Yes, Scotland's largest health board continues to say it is as busy as it's ever been. NHS Greater and Glasgow and Clyde say its hospitals are full. Its occupancy rate is now at 90%. People again are being urged not to stay away from accidents and emergency unless their condition is very urgent or life-threatening. Those who do have to go, unfortunately, are facing very long waits to be treated.
All right, Sharon, thanks very much for joining us. Thank you. Now, in other stories across Scotland, and there are now 40 confirmed cases of monkeypox in the country after 6 new infections were confirmed on Monday. Health officials say the majority of patients are gay or bisexual men and had travelled to Europe within 3 weeks of showing symptoms. The funeral of former Scotland and Rangers goalkeeper Andy Gorham will take place a week on Monday. Rangers will also hold a minute's silence ahead of this Saturday's friendly against Sunderland. Gorham was diagnosed with cancer earlier this year and died on Saturday at the age of 58. Now, acts performing at this year's Edinburgh Fringe say they're disappointed to learn there will be no official Fringe app this year. They say it was a key mode of advertising for smaller acts and that they will now struggle to compete with more well-known performers. Organisers have apologised and say it's due to a lack of funding.
The Fringe was given 1.5 million of funding. Producers, venues and acts, some of them were given no funding, got nothing during the pandemic, no furlough, no money, nothing. And it just feels like this is another kick in the teeth to the performers of the Fringe. And yes, we are the life and soul of the Fringe. The Fringe doesn't exist without the performers.
I'm so sorry to everyone who's disappointed. We're really disappointed ourselves, but quite simply, we suffered from the impacts of COVID as well, and we literally didn't have the time, the human resource or the finances to do it. But we will have it back in 2023, and that's a commitment and a promise.
Well, we'll go back to Westminster very shortly, but first the sport with Ronnie.
Get your fill of the action. STV Sport, sponsored by Papa John's Pizza.
A very busy day. Good evening. Southampton and Rangers are in advanced talks over a £10 million move for Joe Aribo. The attacking midfielder is entering the last year of his contract at Ibrox and has a release clause for that amount in his deal. Aribo scored 9 times for the Ibrox side last season, setting up a further 10 goals. Golf superstar Justin Thomas says the strength of field at this week's Scottish Open is huge for the sport as he prepares to tee off alongside the best players in the world. The holders of the 4 biggest prizes in golf are at the Renaissance Club in East Lothian, just 1 week ahead of the Open Championship at St Andrews. Jamie Borthwick is there for us tonight.
With arguably the most star-studded Scottish Open line-up ever, the 70,000 spectators heading for the Renaissance Club this week are spoiled for choice with who to follow.
Tommy Fleetwood. Hideki's lovely.
Jordan Spieth and Justin Rose.
I've seen Sheffield at the range and he was hitting really well.
Morikawa, he's got the game for the Open Test.
McDonald. Yes, he's my favourite.
Justin Thomas, the main man, definitely.
All 4 reigning major champions are in town, underlining the growing prestige of the tournament.
If you throw out the majors, I would have to think that this is going to be one of the 2, 3, 4 best fields that we play the entire year, which, you know, for the Scottish Open, for Scotland, for the DP World Tour, PGA Tour, like, that's a huge deal.
I was able to play with Bob McIntyre last year, and the fans they're crazy in a good way because they love the game, but they appreciate just us coming out.
Of course, there is half an eye on next week when St Andrews hosts the 150th Open Championship. That's the one every player wants to win.
It's fortunate that both golf courses, I assume, are going to be fairly similar with the style of grasses and firmness, and so it'll be very easy for me to focus on this week when I get out on the golf course tomorrow.
To be honest, I don't think there's a bigger achievement in golf than winning an Open Championship in St Andrews. I think it's as big as it gets.
For me, kind of just want to get back to routine, get back to playing regular golf again, and this is a great week to do it.
In the end, just 4 of the Rebel Live Tour golfers will tee off here tomorrow morning, meaning that particular storm appears to be dying down for now. And indeed, the blustery conditions we've been experiencing around the links today are also due to blow over just in time for the competition beginning. That's raising hopes amongst the spectators for some low scoring across the week. Jamie Borthwick, STV News at the Renaissance Club in East Lothian.
It all gets underway very early doors tomorrow morning. Finally tonight, ahead of the Commonwealth Games, Paralympic medalist Sammy Kinghorn says wheelchair racing changed her life after an accident at the age of 14 left her paralysed from the waist down. Kinghorn, who won silver and bronze at the Tokyo Games last year, hopes to go one better and clinch gold at Birmingham.
It's been a crazy ride. It's not something I ever expected. You know, I never wanted to be a sports person. I was just incredibly lucky to kind of fall into this incredible life. You know, after my accident, I obviously felt incredibly lost and didn't really know what I was going to do or what I wanted to be. But found sport, travelled the world, met incredible people, gone from strength to strength in events and won World Championships medals and now Paralympic medals and hopefully a Commonwealth Games medal.
That's all your sport tonight, folks. Have a very good evening.
Get your fill of the action. STV Sports, sponsored by Papa John's Pizza.
OK, it's time to check in on the weather forecast. Here's Sean.
Watch out for a sudden temperature drop. TUI Blue Hotels, sponsor STV Weather.
Well, it feels as if summer's never going to start. However, tomorrow things will be very different in the east, a bit of a scorcher in some areas. But I want to take you up into the Arctic first of all. Tromsø city, northern Norway, where the temperatures reached 30 degrees last week. That's 86 degrees in Fahrenheit in the Arctic. Not a record for the Arctic, mind you. That's 38 recorded in Siberia 2 years ago, which is incredibly 100 degrees in Fahrenheit. Now, if you wondered what Santa's reindeer get up to in the summer, well, like us, they love to enjoy the beach, have a wee paddle in the water as well. Great to see them enjoying themselves, but in 4 months' time, of course, their training will start. Now, for the time being today, well, it's been a miserable day. Chilly as well, and that breeze, especially in western parts, misty conditions as well. We'll hang on to some outbreaks of rain in the west tonight, but becoming largely dry for many of us. Temperatures should hold in double figures around 11 to 13 degrees Celsius. Now, tomorrow, Yes, it is going to be a bit of a scorcher for some of us. Unbelievable after today, especially in eastern areas, the likes of Ladybank, Cooper, Glenrothes, St Andrews, Falkland. Temperatures possibly as high as 24, maybe even 25 degrees Celsius. So we hang on to a lot of sunshine here and very warm in eastern parts. In the west, cloudier skies, further outbreaks of rain later on the day, staying that way on Friday with the best of the sunshine once again in the east.
TUI Blue Hotels. Sponsor STV Weather.
Now, while support for Boris Johnson appears to be running out in Westminster, a figure he holds in high regard was taking to the stage today in Dunfermline, the world-famous Peppa Pig. In a speech to the business community last year, the Prime Minister praised the popular cartoon character, while our political reporter Laura Alderman has been finding out if the feeling is mutual.
On the streets of Scotland's newest city, you'd be hard-pressed to find a fan of Boris Johnson.
Well, he's not been honest. You have to be straightforward with the public.
He's a Trump in disguise, so you can't trust anything that comes out of his mouth then.
I think if he had any sense at all, he'd just go now, save face.
What do you think he should do?
Go get his hair cut.
While there's not a lot of love here today for Boris Johnson, someone he has expressed affection for is in town performing.
I don't know if you've been to Peppa Pig World. Hands up anyone who's been to Peppa Pig World. Not enough. But I loved it, and Peppa Pig World is very much my kind of place.
But Peppa fans say the Prime Minister's been telling far too many porkies.
How many times can you lie getting away with it, I suppose?
He's held on, hasn't he? But definitely time to go now.
Probably has to go at this point. I don't see any way that he can last until the next election at this point. So
he seems quite stubborn. I think he will hang on.
I think he should resign, whether he does or not.
Yeah, I think he's too pig-headed. I think he's too Peppa pig-headed.
In fact, the only person we spoke to today who wanted him to stay in office didn't want to be identified. And perhaps that says it all. With few left to save his bacon, the curtain could finally be falling on Boris Johnson. Laura Alderman, STV News, Dunfermline.
Peppa Pig and politics, you get it all here on the STV News at 6. Well, that is all from us here in the studio, but with things moving rapidly today, we don't want you to miss a thing, so we're going to hand you back to Catherine and Bernard at Westminster for the final word.
Thanks. Yes, look, Peppa Pig, Owen Pattison, Partygate, and then Chris Pincher. These are all things that have contributed to where we are tonight, Bernard. And look, I think by my count, we're looking at 38 resignations.
Yep. And Sir Graham Brady, who heads up the 1922 committee, we are told, has just gone into Downing Street to offer wise counsel, not wise counsel. He'll be telling the Prime Minister he needs to go. A full-blown cabinet revolt underway. If the Prime Minister doesn't go tonight or tomorrow, the 1922 committee on Monday, I would expect, will change the rules and force him from office.
Where do you think, taking a step back from this ranks in terms of prime ministerial exits?
Well, Prime Ministers can be shunted from office in a number of ways. The most obvious one is that they can lose a general election. That happened to John Major in 1997. It happened also to Gordon Brown in 2010. Sometimes there's an issue, a single issue, which engulfs a Prime Minister. Europe has always been bad for the Conservatives. Remember, David Cameron couldn't win that EU referendum. He had to go. Theresa May, Europe also sunk her in the sense she couldn't get that exit agreement through the House of Commons. She had to go. But sometimes, just sometimes, there's a groundswell of opinion within a political party which says that the Prime Minister has to go. And the historical analogy here is November 1990, when the Cabinet went into revolt against Margaret Thatcher and ended her premiership. She said it was treachery. It was treachery with a smile. Well, there are not many Conservatives smiling around Westminster tonight, but be in no doubt, Boris Johnson is like that Monty Python dead parrot. He has ceased to be.
Bernard Ponsonby, thank you very much. You can hear the helicopter circling above me, all eyes on Downing Street. But for now, from myself and from Bernard, Good night.
Good night.